This week on Deconstructing Comics, Kumar and Ryan discuss Kramers Ergot 9, featuring work by Kim Deitch, Andy Burkholder, Gabrielle Bell, Michael Deforge, and many more. Remember that if you're planning to buy Kramers Ergot or anything else on Amazon, you can help this podcast by going to deconstructingcomics.com/Amazon and make that your bookmark for future purchases. We'll then get a percentage of what you spend. It costs you nothing extra and helps us cover web hosting and the other costs of presenting this show every week.
This is Kumar.
This is Ryan.
And this is Deconstructing Comics. Welcome to Deconstructing Comics. This is Kumar in Melbourne and Ryan in LA.
Los Angeles.
Yes, yep. Awesome. And we're going to talk today about the new Kramers Ergot. It's number 9. And it just came out. It's been, I think the last one was in 2011, number 8.
Sounds right.
Yep, and it's kind of it has become a legendary anthology. To be honest, this is only my second. I have number 8. And I think number 7 was like the really giant, like torso-sized one, right? There was one that was really huge.
Let's go back. So 8 was like a hardcover cloth-bound book with a nice embossing on the cover, I think. And then 7 was the giant, like, old newspaper size one. And then 654. 6, I think, is the one that has the rounded cover.
Okay.
4 is, of course, like the first one that became really famous. 4 was like a phone book with a Brian Chippendale, some Fort Thunder artists.
Okay.
Like colorful rainbow art on the cover. And 4 is the one that like was like so like amazing and cool and like impactful for me as like whenever I saw it, like in when I was in art school. And then 5 was another big one and colorful one. I feel like 4, 5, and 6 were kind of similarly formatted and similar to this one, right?
Right. So did you start with 4? Was that your first one?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't remember when it came out, but I'm sure I saw it when I was an art student in like 2004, 5, 6.
Okay. Okay. There is another one we should mention, which is the Simpsons Treehouse of Horror number 15 from 2009, which had all Kramers artists in it. It's got like Jeffrey Brown and CF, Jordan Crane, Sammy Harcum, who's the editor of all of them, and a bunch of other Kramers people. And that's almost a Kramers issue in itself. And I actually went to the Kramers panel at San Diego Comic-Con in July, and he cool. talked about Sammy talked about how he wanted to actually skip a number of Kramers because he kind of considered the Treehouse of Horror issue to be one as well, and how he worked 2 years
That's cool.
on it. Yeah.
I didn't know that. That's cool.
Yeah, you should track it down. It's super funny, and every strip is signed Matt Groening, no matter who drew it or wrote it.
That's
it's really
so
funny.
cool.
Yeah.
That's so cool. That's funny, ironic, and pointed, like in the way mainstream comics are done by all these artists, but it's always by Bob Kane or whatever. That's cool to just volunteer to do that.
Yeah, because it's cool because they're really obviously like these very idiosyncratic indie comic artists doing these Simpsons strips that are sometimes really oddball, and
cool.
Like the Tim Hensley one is really strange, especially. But but they're all signed Matt Groening. It's really funny, and the strips all the comics in there are really funny too. There are some laugh out loud jokes in there.
Yeah, I don't think I ever bought the book. I'm not sure, but I remember seeing it and I remember reading and it was funny. That's so cool that it like achieved its #1 mission of being a funny comic book.
Yeah, for sure. But that's kind of interesting because the Treehouse of Horror had a very clear theme. Like, it was Simpsons Halloween comics. It was like so tight, and they were all signed Matt Groening. So let's get to Kramers 9, which we were talking about in exchanging emails, which this one, maybe more than the others or less, I don't know, maybe we'll try to define that, is a little bit, it's scattered. Maybe not a little bit scattered, maybe very scattered, was your reaction.
Well, yeah, I mean, I told you in an email when we were getting ready to talk about this that I felt kind of bad and that I wasn't like having a great time with the book, or I don't know what to say. Like I'll say that I felt kind of. I mean, it's you can call it my deficiency as a reader if someone would like, or obviously I wouldn't. I'm not here to say the book is bad. I don't want to say the book is bad or scattered is what I'm saying, okay. But I've kind of felt kind of bad and scattered. I don't know.
Okay. Let's unpack.
You're gonna hear me hedge like that because I'll just I'm glad to talk to you about what I didn't really like about the book, and but obviously like I respect all these artists and stuff, so it's being honest about that and dumb I guess, but we can talk about it.
I think I know where you're coming from because when I read 8, which is like I said the only other one that I own. There's no stated theme of the book, but I felt like there was a kind of high art versus low art thing going on, and popular art versus underground art, and it had a kind of message about that was not explicit, but you got it from reading the book, because there was like all this kind of gallery art in it, and there was also they reprinted these Penthouse comics at the back.
Oh, yeah.
Which were like really beautifully drawn, but almost unreadable because they were so stupid. Contrasted with some stuff, there was like some genre, there was some kind of typical genre stuff from Johnny Ryan. And when I say typical, I don't mean that in an insulting way. It's like this really intense kind of horror sci-fi story. In there. So there was a kind of this push and pull going on, and it made it a really kind of interesting experience. And this one definitely feels like I didn't get an overall feeling from the book. Like, there were strips, and some strips I liked, and some I loved, and some I didn't care for. But there was when I got to the last page, I wasn't like, it didn't generate it didn't pop any ideas about any overall arching theme.
Yeah, I felt, as I went through the book, I found myself kind of like tracking certain kind of similar ideas or like images, like a lot of that went through the stories. And by the way, I think I heard Sammy say when he was assembling this book, that I think he was saying, that he really wanted to make a book of of great stories by artists that he really likes and wants to showcase. Mm-hmm. So I for some reason, I feel like I heard that it wasn't assembled with a theme in mind, mm-hmm. but I did find like things in common with the books. Maybe this is so broad to say, but there were a lot of stories with kind of like suicide and self-destruction.
Okay, yeah. And
quite a few stories with kind of like revelation, like kind of like seeing God or experiencing some intense superhuman or supernatural revelation. I'm thinking of the story by I want to get the names right. Is it The Cannibal Ball?
Yes.
Which is like the super bright colored.
Yeah.
By
Lale Westwind.
Lale Westwind.
Oh,
yeah.
Lale Westwind. Okay.
that's a story about this person who has this intense, I don't know, this intense interdimensional revelation. There's the one from, and sorry as I like pause to go through. Oh yeah, there's the Kim Deitch story.
Yeah.
Where it's like a little boy meets an old man at a museum who tells him of how when he was a kid he found that this monkey troop was an alien civilization or something.
Yeah.
He takes mushrooms to learn their language and becomes one of them. There was a story by there was kind of a weird mystery story by Adam Buttrick that was like about two cops chasing this murderer.
Yeah.
Which was by the way, something else about this book is like I really am a big fan of a ton of these cartoonists.
Sure.
But when I read Adam's story, I feel like it's kind of like it's hard for me to like read and track what's going on. He does this weird thing where he kind of draws in this like kind of like old comic style language, but with this weird perspective and hand, and it makes going from panel to panel just a bit of a puzzle. I have to be really deliberate. Sure. and it treads on the boundaries of what of the information that he can give. So I felt these similarities, guys. It's not going to be very enjoyable to just slowly go through them and try to remember them I haven't prepared. But there's also the Matthew Thurber one that was like about him like going back in time. Yeah. I actually really liked that one. That was one of my favorites, where Matthew Thurber admits that his name is similar to James Thurber of The New Yorker, goes back in time to assassinate him, and stops himself at the last minute or something. It's kind of vague, but that's another one with kind of revelation upon revelation. Mm-hmm. Noel Freibert's comics throughout. Noel Freibert does these like super dark stories and like beautiful like one-page strips of like these kind of like weird characters living in constant metaphor of death, constantly everywhere. Just overwhelming death metaphors, and just that's another one of these like kind of weird death, weird revelation as the death metaphor kind of returns and comes back and back. So I'm saying that there are these themes.
You're totally right.
That things seem to come together, and that is meaningful to a reader, but I don't know how deliberate that is, and if that's intentional. The thing that kind of struck me as I was reading through it is I was reading these stories by. Okay, let me just say like what I thought Kumar is. Like, I kind of felt like I was reading these stories by really good artists, like 10 or 20 or fewer or more pages at a time, and I felt like they suffered for being sandwiched in between other works that are so aesthetically different, and maybe thematically different, or even subtly thematically different, that being put next to each other made it kind of this weird ride from one to the other. And I kind of like didn't feel like I knew really what artists were going for, or what they were really about with just this small piece. I didn't really feel like it was suitable context for me. That's kind of like that's kind of what I kind of felt as I was going through it. Like for example, Adam Buttrick, that like 8-page strip.
Yeah,
I think it's so maybe it's weird to say, but I felt like Adam Buttrick's strip, which starts with a bang and ends with a bang, would have been maybe less confusing if it were by itself, and had kind of a proper beginning space and an ending space, instead of just being there between these other stories. Or the one that came right after his. Let's see. I got to look up. Oh, it's Leon Sadler's story, Leon Sadler's story had this one called All Are Fucking Dead.
Yeah. That was
which
crazy.
is like, it's very crazy. It's kind of hard to tell if you're supposed to be reading the pictures with the captions at the same time. If they're to use like Scott, what's his name? Not Scott Pilgrim. Scott McCloud.
Yeah.
To use Scott Pilgrim's Understanding Comics. Kind of like it feels like it might be like non sequitur kind of, and as you go, you kind of, I was like, oh, okay, they're connected, but it's like two guys talking about being in war, and talking about it and being in it.
Yeah, like they're like super tough cops, like hard boiled.
Is that what they are? Are they cops? Yeah, I guess they're cops.
Yeah. They're these hard boiled cops talking about all the other cops and criminals that got shot, or it's all over the place, kind of. It's pretty hard to make sense of. There's a lot of floating dismembered heads with like blood and gore. It's drawn into kind of I guess what you'd call a primitive style, which a few of the strips are, and that's fine. But I find some of the strips, but maybe to play devil's advocate, I found sometimes the abruptness of the endings of some of the strips kind of lent them more power.
Oh, that's cool that you say that, man.
Like, I felt like sometimes like this All Are Fucking Dead would just go on for pages, and you'd be like, what is going on? And then it ends with a panel of them just shooting up into the sky, and it kind of, I felt a kind of poignancy. I don't know what it was coming from, but there were...
Oh, that's cool. I'm glad you say that. Yeah. I know what you mean, yeah.
And even the one we were talking about before, the Cannibal Ball, it ends with the zebra making this kind of profound statement in the jungle. Another walks as before, consumed by small misery. They cannot carry the weight of cosmic darkness. And then there you get a silent panel of the zebra being eaten by all the other animals. And there's the... God, a lot of them were like that. They just ended suddenly, and I felt like there was some kind of depth in the finale.
Yeah, that's cool. Well, I really liked some of the stories that were... I liked it when stories were more clear with their theme.
Sure.
Such as Lale's story, The Cannibal Bull. I felt like it was, kind of ending, I think like the last thing they say is like, humanity is a young race. They cannot carry the weight of cosmic darkness. The animals say before they start just eating each other.
Yeah.
And I felt like when a story was very clear, I felt like that kind of statement of theme made something like stronger and easier for me to like, I felt like it was more impactful to me, like that was one that stated the theme really clear.
Right.
I think another one which
go
ahead.
Sorry, I was going to say similarly, Anya Davidson's Hypatia's Last Hours, which is the true story of Hypatia.
Oh, is it a true story?
I believe but she she gets, I think so. I feel like I've heard it before somewhere. But she's a woman who, is educating others and is considered a criminal for that. And it's got a very clear theme. And then the end, it ends with a silent page where basically they beat her to death. And it's very gory, shocking, a very upsetting final couple of panels in that one as well, where they beat her with bricks.
Yeah, I didn't like that one.
Okay.
I really felt let down by the end of that story, and I didn't know that it was based on a true story, which gives it a different weight.
I hope it is. I hope I'm not just talking out of my ass.
No, I would take your word for it, because I would say that when I read that story, my experience of reading it is that it starts out with Hypatia speaking with one of her students in Alexandria, Egypt, 415 CE. And she's speaking to her student, and he's talking about how he doesn't care about education. He just wants to live a pleasurable life. He's rich and to enjoy it. And Hypatia is not into it. he even tries to seduce her, and she's like, I'm totally not into that dude. And then she leaves her student's house, and on her way into the city, she gets stopped by some men, and they kill her. They kill her for basically for being educated.
Yeah.
More or less. And yeah, I don't know. I want to say, like, I guess I felt when I read it like, oh man, like what a journey for this character that I was getting ready to go on. Actually, I started out thinking that it wasn't. In the beginning, it's more that student speaking. So I was maybe expecting that student to go through some kind of transformation. That's what I was expecting in the beginning. And then as I'm learning, like, oh, this is going to be about Hypatia as she goes down the street, sees a guy selling something, meets some guys on the street, and then she's just killed. And I thought, like, of course, I feel like that's an illustration of kind of like, in some ways, the status quo as it is now, or as maybe some forces in our culture would have it. I think that's a real thing. That she basically gets killed for being an educated woman.
Yeah.
And she resists the temptation to use her access to rich men to enjoy her life that way. And she's just punished basically for being who she is and for trying to live up to herself. But the story itself just cut off so fast. I felt like, okay. I felt it was a lot of buildup for a really fast and violent and kind of senseless death. But obviously, if that's a true story, that's pretty powerful right there.
And I think maybe because I think I knew what was gonna happen. Somehow I knew.
Yeah.
I felt like when it got to it, it's like the abruptness of it is like the abruptness of the reality of a woman just being stripped and dragged into a temple and beaten to death with bricks.
Oh yeah. I mean, that was a hell of an ending.
Yeah.
I mean, her death is violent, and it just happens like in the midst of two panels on a destructive, page.
Yeah.
Whoa.
Yeah.
There. Let's see. What other stories were you especially interested in?
The one I loved the most was I'm gonna try to find it because it was a cartoonist I didn't know. Sexy Guns by Helge Ruhmann on
what page is that on?
30. So this is it's a whole pile of 4-panel strips, almost like you'd expect newspaper strips to be. But it takes place in some sort of world where people are really savage. All the men have super long hair and long beards, and they look really wild and Neanderthal-like. And there are also some other sort of blobby kind of creatures that exist in this world. They're all silent. There's no dialogue, but they're so random and very hard to tell what's going on. But the drawings are just awesome. And like there's one on page 32 where there's this black blob creature moving across the landscape. You can kind of tell it's a living thing somehow, which is weird and amazing. And then it's in the second panel, it seems to be moving towards a cliff or it's on a waterfall. And then in the third panel, some nude savages. One of the male is really scarred up, is watching this thing cross the landscape. And then finally, the last panel is like 2 black houses. And that's it. And it's just like, what is going on? And they're all kind of like weird like that. Like the next one, some people are beating up some other people in the street, and this black, strange creature walks up. So 2 people are left lying in the street, and one creature walks up and gives the guy a wedgie, and another creature walks up and sticks his tongue in the other guy's ear, it looks like, and then when he leaves, the guy's face has melted. And it's just pages and pages of this bizarre, beyond dreamlike. I don't have dreams anything like this. They're just so otherworldly. I love these ones, totally.
You know what? I'm going to say that is probably the one story I did not read. I think when I stopped, just my bad. I started in the beginning, and then when I picked off at a second time, I didn't read that one.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, I like all that.
Yeah.
It seems like illustrations of a chaotic and cruel and violent world, which I think is seen in other stories too.
Sure, but sometimes they're just it is chaotic and cruel and violent, but sometimes they're just strange. And there is a kind of revelation talking about it, because there's like one on the top of page 34 where this guy he's robed like he's a priest or an ascetic, and his hair is actually a bit combed, walks into this house, and then the third panel you don't see it, you just see the house, and then suddenly there's all this light beaming out of it in the fourth panel. So there's a bit of stuff like that in there. It's very hard to parse, but it's kind of I did kind of have an emotional reaction to them, and I laughed at some of them. They were just so oddball. Like there's one on page 31 where one of these guys is going down on a woman in a house, and these three blob creatures are watching at the window, and they look shocked, and then they run away. And then they run down a road into the forest, and in the last panel, they're just crying in the forest. I totally loved it. Yeah, weird, totally. But this was the one that I loved reading both times through.
Coming up, Kumar and Ryan discuss comics by Dash Shaw, Andy Burkholder, Gabrielle Bell, and more, including a comic in which checking your email can be a violent or sexual act. But first, if you value the content on Deconstructing Comics, Critiquing Comics, and To the Bat Polls, if these shows have helped you get a new perspective on something or to discover something new, help us keep going with a monthly donation via Patreon at patreon.com/deconcomics. If everyone listening gave just $3 a month, it would make a big difference. We'd be able to reach several of our Patreon goals and bring you more content. If we can bring in another $89 per month, we'll reach our $150 a month goal, and I'll make available the first 2.5 years of Deconstructing Comics, over 120 episodes that are currently missing from our website. We'd really appreciate it if everyone pitched in a few bucks a month to get us to that $150 level.
Hi, my name is Billy Hogan, host of the Superman Fan Podcast, which explores the world of Superman and the many creators who have added to his legacy over the decades. Episodes will feature creator biographies or highlight some of their top stories they have created as well as their top characters. Other episodes will feature topics appropriate to the holiday or the time of the year. For instance, Valentine's Day will feature stories about the women in Superman's life. April Fool's Day will feature some of the bizarre Superman Silver Age stories, or some of the imaginary stories that have been published. Halloween will feature some of the scary Superman stories, or some of his strange transformations, and of course, some of the Christmas Superman stories. The website can be found at supermanfanpodcast.mypodcast.com. The blog is supermanfanpodcast.blogspot.com, and you can send email to supermanfanpodcast@gmail.com. I also have a spoiler-free comic book review blog of the titles I read every week, which can be found at mypulllist.blogspot.com, and you can send email about this blog to mypulllist@gmail.com.
I just read on tcj.com. I enjoyed reading Dash Shaw talk about his piece in Kramers. Dash Shaw is doing a cartoonist diary on TCJ, which means that every week he's writing and sharing some pictures. And he talked about this thing, which actually I went through Dash Shaw's entire piece, not knowing it was his, which I think is pretty cool. Mm. That we're all familiar with his work and kind of his style, but I did not know it the whole time. And it's pretty beefy. It's like 20 pages out of his book. It's like kind of like Revolutionary War, Civil War. Oh, by the way, a big thing in this book is, so many. I'm just going to say, Dash, when he in his TCJ, diary the other day, he talked about what this piece was. That it's about Quakers during the Revolutionary War. Sorry, but it's kind of set in our world. And but because so many stories in this book are in this kind of weird, out of our universe, kind of their own weird different universes. Like you were just talking about the four panel strips. Dash's story follows John Pham's story about these two kids wandering into some hobos camp who've been maimed in some war. There's a bunch of these kind of not exactly our world stories. Kind of metaphorical world. So I read the book, or I read Dash Shaw's piece, not knowing for sure if it was even our world. But it's sad. A lot of the stories that show kind of senseless violence didn't make me feel sad. They made me feel just kind of alienated from the page. But this story did make me feel kind of sad because it's about two. I think my memory, it was two women who are kind of defending their house from these soldiers, and it looks like they're just going to let them do their thing, but then they decide to shoot them.
Well, it's actually
the soldier. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I was going to say, it seems like, so they come into the house. They're looting for. I think he says specifically they're just taking stuff that they can use to sell or whatever for the war effort, basically. And they think the house is empty, but then these women appear and they point a gun and they're like, "Oh, sorry." And he puts he's picked up a necklace or something. And he puts it back and it's like, "Okay, we're not going to take your stuff. Just let us go." And they're about to go, and it seems like the women have a change of heart or something, or they realize that the soldiers are on their side. I'm not sure. They give them some food to leave as they're leaving, but then you can see from the person's clothing, it's somebody else comes around the corner. This one wearing a kind of apron comes around and shoots one of the soldiers. So she doesn't know that they've made peace inside the house. And that's
okay.
what. Anyway, sorry. This is my reading of it.
That's a good point. Yeah.
And then everything goes to hell because she shoots this soldier. Basically, everybody has to.
Yeah, and there's this, kind of everyone pays for it. Soldiers get shot. The women, I don't remember if the women get shot, but their house gets burned down, and it kind of ends with this surgery scene.
Yeah.
I think for a young man, and it's just, I guess the story managed to get me in the kind of heads of these different sides, and I think especially arresting was the page where the woman is ready to shoot these guys for taking her things, and she just decides not to do it.
Yeah.
I guess he puts his gun down and she puts her gun down, and that arresting scene seemed kind of real, and then just as real, they just end up shooting each other anyway.
Yeah.
I didn't catch. You're right though that it's someone from the outside, so it's not like it was the woman's choice. But it just all the same, someone ends up shooting and it all goes bad. And I felt really sad at the end, the way it kind of slowly draws you through the results of that confrontation. But by contrast, a lot of these other stories had this kind of violence or cruelty or neglect, and I just kind of felt like I'm kind of reading it and I feel, what a world that this cartoonist is depicting, but it doesn't speak to me at all. I mean, I don't know what to get from this. The world is cruel. Yeah, okay. That's how I felt through a lot of stories. And I'll say a different one, actually, as I was feeling that, a real strong contrast is the story. Let's see, it's drawn in blue ink about the animals that help the suicidal person. Oh my gosh, again, we're going through and checking page numbers for cartoonist names. A contrast to that was Adieu, Cruel World by Baptiste Virote.
Yeah.
And, I felt that was a story that spoke its theme kind of nicely. And I guess so many of the stories were kind of like mysterious in the message they're carrying forward, kind of a depiction of this cruel world, and each one a slightly different sort of metaphor for what that means. And I felt like the kind of message I was getting as I went through it is like, and this is just how the world is, and this is just an experience of the world. A bit more. It's a bit clear when you talk about Anya Davidson's story of Hypatia's last hours. If that's true, well, that actually is. If that's a true story, that is a bit meaningful. But a lot of the stories are just kind of characters wandering through this difficult metaphor for the world, and it's very hard and harsh, and it's rough. But I don't really know where to go from it.
Sure.
And in contrast, Adieu, Cruel World is about a guy, in kind of it begins in a state of nonsense where this guy is just jumping off a cliff and he's just hysterical. His life is saved by two birds which zoom in from the sky under his feet and tell him, "Don't kill yourself, dude. You got a lot to live for, man. Don't kill yourself. This is wrong." And they dump him on the grass. And he tries to kill himself another way by hanging himself. And these other animals see him killing himself, and they're like, "Dude, you can't do that. You can't hang yourself." And they eat his necktie, the little worms, and he falls to the ground. And I think it happens a third time. His life just keeps getting saved by animals, and they're telling him like, "You've got a lot to live for." And I felt like I was just getting something from that,
Yeah.
The forcefulness. The forcefulness of these animals putting themselves in harm's way to help him against his like super strong, we don't know why, but you just take it for granted because he draws it really hard. This guy just really wants to kill himself. It's also strong, and I feel like I'm really getting something from that because, to be honest, who hasn't been there and felt that way? Sure. And what those animals are saying is a real thing. And in the end, actually, that story ends in a kind of ludicrous, sad ending. No spoilers, but I felt like ending with the kind of ludicrous, kind of pointless end because of the journey that I went through that deliberately addresses the issue of kind of the pointlessness of life, and it had actually something to go beyond that. And then hitting a pointless end, I felt like it was more meaningful and had something to say, and I don't know. I felt touched or affected by that. I'll say a really strong contrast against that is starts on page 243. Ryan checks the credits. Comics and Gags by Abraham Diaz.
Yeah.
The very kind of like messy, dark line about this guy walking down the street, smoking and getting angry and seeing kind of terrors in public, and
he's just gotten out of jail too. Like he
just gets out of jail, and that's that I feel like that's a story about a guy. You just enter this comic strip. Guy walks out of jail, and you're just seeing this guy walk in a world of shit.
Yeah,
seeing shitty people all around him. Finally does some shit himself. I think he kills a guy and cuts his head off, so does his own unspeakable shit. Just gets walked into a police car by some shitty police, treated shitty at jail, and just ends up home at jail in just a world of shit. And I felt like I felt like I don't know what I got out of that.
I hear what you're saying, but this one, more than some of the others, I feel like was a more complete experience because the art is so full on, like it's so intense and dark, and he smudged the ink all over the place to make it really full on. So I don't know if I necessarily it was necessarily a positive experience, but I was totally, I felt like it was quite absorbing while I was in it.
Yeah, it was that. It was that. It was, it was absorbing in that experience, but I just felt like it didn't take me on any journey at all. I start on the outside in my world, and I enter this comic story and I see this world of shit, and I'm like, okay, all right, terrible world.
Yeah.
And I don't get any, I mean, I don't get turned away. It doesn't change my in the middle of the story. It doesn't change my image of that. At the end of the story, it doesn't change my image, and I didn't really feel like it really went anywhere.
That there were two stories that really, for me, didn't connect, but not because of the way their violent lens on the world, but they're what I would call night out stories. One is called Puff Cats by Andy Burkholder, and the other is Close Enough by Trevor Alexopoulos. And they're both
where was that Trevor one?
That's on page 193. And they're both kind of just about nights out partying, which is something the kind of Hernandez brothers used to do in their sleep, and was great. And now, I don't know, they just kind of, I don't know, maybe it's because I'm almost 42, but I was just like, I'm tired of seeing these people out partying for pages and pages. And those for me, I felt really disconnected from those. I don't know if it was the strips. There's not necessarily anything wrong with the strips themselves. It was just maybe my perspective on them.
Yeah, I really did enjoy getting into Andy Burkholder's story.
Okay.
Because I really enjoyed how it kind of started with these kind of like, I don't know, genre conventions, like, and then it just kind of trips them up. It's about these characters who are like stuck in like a story, a genre story. Like this guy is calling for a team to assemble and do some mission, but his first team is like, oh, what? Fuck you. And the next team, they just don't answer the phone, and it's just kind of silly. And then the third team, he gets them to do this thing, and they just kind of end up being fuck ups, and yet it does kind of return in the end. He does kind of get back to it, and it doesn't go anywhere. They kind of have their string of adventures. I liked that about it. I guess I felt myself going into these stories that were kind of familiar, these kind of story types that were familiar. Mm. And then saw them get twisted around in a way that I thought was fun. Although, in the end, the end is kind of sad. I think that the last page is that same guy trying to set up a team, and he's just like, "Oh my God, these people are fuck ups," which I thought was pretty funny because I hadn't thought about him for most of the story.
Yeah.
And then the other one, right? That was Close Enough.
Yeah.
Yeah, that didn't. I don't know. It didn't have a particularly strong effect either way with me. I kind of liked. I like that both of them have this kind of loose hand at kind of a straightforward story, and they each have their own ways of drawing it loose. Kind of different ways to abstract kind of figural illustration, in their own ways.
Yeah.
That was neat.
Yeah. There's also this one that was set there. This one seemed like it belonged in a different book. It's the one in Paris. It's called Paris by Manuel Fiore, and it's beautifully drawn.
Yeah.
And it just is kind of amazing. And again, it's one where it just ends with a silent panel, or a couple panels where these kids are on a school trip in Paris, and the female teacher who's chaperoning them is kind of sick of them, and then ends up just staying behind. The drawings are amazing. It doesn't seem to fit in the rest of the book anywhere.
Yeah, it is odd that. Yeah.
And there's also this one about, it's 2 pages about this graffiti in elementary school on page 262, which is super funny. And it's about these kids that keep trying to graffiti things, like they would graffiti fuck on the wall and then would get rewritten as rock.
Yeah, I really liked that one. It was
actually, funny, super funny, yeah.
And I felt that there was kind of a message in that, like a message about kind of art versus kind of about art and what art actually does.
Sure.
These kids are trying to say something or do something or say something with their art, and everything they do gets subverted. You know, it's like totally. It's another metaphor, but this one I guess spoke to me, and also just in relation to everything else in the book. You know, everything they do, they write some, like you said, they write fuck, and the teacher changes it to rock, and they're disappointed, so they write fuck school, and he writes rock is so cool, and then they just do more advanced graffiti, and he always turns it into something positive. And I think what's funny about the book is they feel so crestfallen every time he does it.
Yeah.
They're like, what? Oh man,
all that hard work, that was my best work.
Yeah. Yeah, and man, I totally feel that about fucking artists.
Yeah.
You know, artists, you know, we are, I don't want to say we, or you know, it's or they, it's just artists. Artists do this stuff, and you know, art is something which can be reinterpreted or remanaged, you know, by others. And ultimately what they do in the end is they just throw a brick through a window.
Yeah.
And it's like, if your purpose was to fuck with the school, why don't you just do that? I guess to me it feels like if you're going to make art about some topic, you know, why are you content with making art, something that's so malleable and soft? You know, kind of asks you why you're making art. Why are you content with that when it's so effectless?
Yeah.
Often, you know, oh, you made art that says a statement about something, big deal. You know, Dick Cheney can read your alternative comic book about the war, and didn't change anything because Dick Cheney isn't an artist and he doesn't need to make art. Made a bigger impact than you did, kind of way, you know. But I think also about that story is that it's so funny and delightful as it goes, and actually it did end at the end of the second page just like, oh, we'll just throw a rock. Yeah. And that ending was great. Yeah. 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 I mean, I guess you know, I when I talk about this, I get into this how do you say prescriptive mood, which is so dumb. I don't want to be that way, but maybe for myself, you know, if not for others, I feel this sense of like, man, you know, and this story is one that kind of makes me feel this way, is like, man, you know, if the stories that have these like stronger themes or speak a little more directly to me are just more powerful than these stories about people wandering through metaphorical worlds. And by the way, to say just wandering through metaphorical worlds is condescending, but I think in some cases, for me, I didn't feel a lot of strength beyond that, and it's a matter of degree. It's not one or the other, obviously. Yeah. Obvious, it's you know, another one is the Jerry Moriarty, these cat paintings. Right. Actually, I think similar to Kramers 8 with that. With that, you know, the selected comics from the 70s. I do think it's a pretty cool move to just include a bunch of paintings. Yes,
totally. I wanted more of that.
Yeah, you know, by being so different and being narrative, and if I also, hey, you know, to be honest though, I think this it's really nice. You know, in all these things, this is the only thing where the author included a little note about what this meant to him, why he did it, and actually, I really liked that. Yeah. I mean, I'm saying, come to think of that now, because not that I think that's the right thing to do necessarily, but that context actually really made it meaningful in a way that, I don't know, maybe if I was given a little more context to some of these artists in the book, it would have made my experience with the work a little more digestible.
Sure. Well, it's almost like the Simpsons issue, because as we've been struggling to talk about this book, one of the things we've been struggling with is the artists' names aren't listed next to the strips. Not even their names. Yeah. Like, you got to flip back to the table of contents to figure out who drew a comic. That's come up.
Is that purely a stylish thing, or do you think that's a rule thing? Because I wonder, do any artists do? I think not a single one does it, and I'm pretty sure, speaking for myself as a cartoonist, a lot of cartoonists learn to do that, learn to write your name on your work. Just like when you write a Tumblr post, you should maybe tag yourself somehow so it doesn't get tossed forever. So the fact that nobody does it seems deliberate, doesn't it?
I do feel like it was an editorial decision to try to make the book a single experience. So that's kind of what we were talking about is how the book feels like it's a bit disjointed. Even if there are some connecting themes, but I do feel like not having the artist names on there makes it. I don't know. I think they were trying to make it more coherent in a way.
I mean, that's a cool choice, a cool strategy. If that's it does seem that's a deliberate choice. So that's interesting. But I mean, isn't it weird though with comics? I mean, like I don't know about like like a written story, an anthology of written work. You can't just tell that it's someone's work by looking at the pages. But with comics, actually, I'm just saying when you don't put the names on it, that is an interesting choice to not put the author's name on the beginning of each one. Although on the other hand, a lot of readers of this book, but 100% not all, obviously, are going to know a lot of authors just by the, just by the style. I mean, obviously, they don't look like they're drawn by the same person. Yeah. So in a way, it makes it more cohesive, but in a way, it doesn't really do that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I totally. Yeah, I mean,
it does make the style similar.
Yeah, it's almost like an attempt to do it, but there's no way it's going to work because every time you hit Al Columbia page or that Renee French page, it's like, oh, yeah, you're in another world.
But it's still an interesting gesture to make.
Sure.
Yeah.
What did you make of the? Let's talk about it. Let's single out a few others. Like, what about the Stephen Weissman one, the first one, Silver Medicine Horse?
Oh, yeah, man, I tell you what, man, I read the Steve Weissman strip back when it was published online on Jordan Crane's site, whatthingsdo.com.
Yeah.
And I think What Things Do isn't really publishing a lot nowadays. It's a great little platform that Jordan Crane made. And at times there was a lot of serial work, a lot of it by Stephen Weissman. For a while, it was kind of collecting different books. Jordan would put up some of his older comics, I think, on there. Anyway, I remember when this, because I subscribed to the RSS feed of What Things Do, and I remember when this came out on the site, and it hit me. I was like, whoa, like what a cool book. I mean, what a weird story. Let's see, it's the first one, so I can count the pages. It was 15 pages long. Yeah. And what an interesting journey I went on reading this story. It's about Silver Medicine Horse, about an Indian riding his own horse into a canyon, looking for this other white kind of magical horse. Mm-hmm. And it's as much communication. It's so much communication with animals. There's two horses. There's a puma. There's like the forces of nature crashing down on him. I really went on a journey with this. And hey, you know what, by the way, a lot of these comics, maybe if I encountered them in a different way, I would have been taken on a similarly affecting journey, which is kind of my whole point.
Yeah.
Meaning this story really did take me on a journey, how unexpected. It ends up just being, one person going through mostly one spot and dealing with different animals. The weather changes, the environment changes. I thought it was a cool story.
Yeah, for sure. And again, I love once again, there's a kind of silent ending, which I found was really powerful, where somehow mysteriously horse number one, not Silver Medicine Horse, has ended up in this cave, which is, as far as I can tell, physically not possible, but it's in there, and he lets the puma have it.
And that's another story of kind of, to call nature senseless is kind of a Werner Herzog move, but it's kind of a story about, kind of senseless. It's about violence.
Yeah.
And the kind of cruelty of this world. This Native American guy is kind of, he's trying to find this kind of, maybe to talk about revelation, this kind of magical horse, kind of following this magical horse into nature, almost dying by flood and then dying by puma to catch it. And in the end, his own horse dies. He doesn't catch the horse. And it just kind of ends that way. So, kind of similar with this kind of, it's another, and again, I would say that there isn't exactly a theme being spoken here beyond, this is the way the world is, or this is one experience of the world as it is. So I think it connects thematically to a lot of the other work.
Right.
So I enjoyed it when I first read it. I kind of breezed through it this time because I was, eager to read everything else, and it's the first story here, but it's a story I like.
Yeah, for sure. There's a Gabrielle Bell excerpt in here, which about her trying to buy a house for her mother, which I don't know, it was a bit flat for me. I think maybe if it was the whole book, if it was in context of the book it's supposed to be.
Hey, and that's another thing. Yeah, I mean, I feel like just what you're saying is, I feel like if it were its own thing, it would be a bit more meaningful. Yeah. But surrounded by the other flavors left and right, you gotta love the way she draws.
Sure.
And her writing style is cool, and the story of her mom, which I assume is autobiographical, is touching. It's in a way, that's what an anthology is supposed to do, I guess, make you want to seek these artists out.
I think but from reading 8, I felt like that was like a package that I didn't need to seek those other artists out. Like each thing had a kind of place in there. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I know what you mean. That is nice too.
Let's talk about the Deforge 3-pager, which we haven't mentioned. Which is a weird, almost transgressive, it's like, I can't even describe it. But, I don't think we've ever done a really abstract or avant-garde comic on deconstructing comics. And so I'm kind of glad we're here doing it. But it's very hard to...
I'm so glad to do that.
It's kind of, I find it's hard to verbalize a lot of, what's there.
So wait... Yeah, so this strip is another one which I read online when it was first posted, and I really liked. And then when I was reading this book, I kind of read through it really fast because I was excited to read everything else. So it's a book of it's like 3 pages about a strangely figured man in a field with a nice smile and nice eyes and a constant boner. And he is just looking at the reader straight on and speaking to us. The whole thing is him speaking to the reader. And he tells us that he's your computer. And he's just your computer talking to you. And he seems like he's really trying to force this conversation into a sexual thing. He seems like he really wants to fuck you. Or I think it's like, it says like, oh, you selected suck my dick.
Yeah.
Okay, you're going to suck my dick now. And you don't see it. You just see his face as like, it assumes, I like it because I don't take this guy's word for it. Maybe he is just a silly man staring out at the reader, kind of forcing the reader to have this conversation. I don't actually... When you have like this one person looking at you and speaking, I have to say by his strange manner, I don't take it for granted that an actual person, the reader, the unseen character on the other side of the page, actually selected suck dick.
Yeah.
I actually feel like he is kind of manipulating you into sucking his dick. He really wants that. I think there's a scene where like the reader or this other person comes on the like grass, and he's like, "Oh, you got cum on your emails. Oh right. No."
Well, that was
this like. Go ahead.
Sorry, I was going to say that was the. That's kind of where it got more interesting for me because now we find that these little beings are emails, and how they get information is by slicing animals open and reading their innards, almost like an oracle. They cut things open, and then information about Jane Austen comes out of them, and it becomes this kind of strange metaphorical world where things in our world, like information, are represented by beings.
Or, what does it make you feel like when you open up a website, and you find some information that someone put together, that's kind of like you slicing that person's body open. Or it just kind of makes this experience, it kind of like unearths this aggression, or this kind of violence, which you didn't think that checking your email was violent or sexual.
Yeah.
But it kind of forces us to frame our rapidly evolving future into a weird picture of sexual violence. And I think something that hits me about this story is like, actually, because Michael Deforge has done different kinds of metaphors in a similar kind of way. And by the way, his stories are like so fun and funny. They're hilarious.
Yeah.
And this is funny. And that's what makes, the fact they're so funny and like charming, like, is what draws you in and makes you want to give credence to the weird metaphor. The fact that it's like so funny and charming.
Sure.
You're like, oh, you'll roll with it, and I was gonna say, like, yeah, it's so charming. Oh, and like in 2016, I guess when I started the story, I felt like, oh, okay, is this going to be a story about how in the future computers are people? Okay. Oh, wait. Okay, this is silly. This is different. And then like, oh, okay, whoa, he wants to say that about that. But through it all, because his narrative storytelling is so nice and the writing is funny. And he has this kind of way of drawing things like unexpectedly goofy and again charming, always charming. It keeps you going, and I really like that about this story.
Yeah, I agree, and I was kind of hypnotized by once I figured out that the butterflies were emails, that's what an email was a butterfly. It pulled me into that strange world.
Yeah.
And I don't even know if it's metaphorical. It's just for me, it was just that was the way things existed in that world that he built in a couple of pages. It was very odd. It's a bit like the Sexy Guns ones, where it was just 4 panels again and again. It just is so weird that I was right there. I think the only other one we haven't really talked about. Oh, there's a couple. There's
I mean, we haven't talked about a bunch, and we shouldn't talk about everything, I guess.
Yeah, there's one called Fluorescent on page 140 by Anthony Haschetti, which is about these animals that go on a train. Oh no, sorry, it's one animal. It's a fox creature and a human, and they go on a train, which is some sort of art train, and.
Yeah, kind of feels like it's about, like you're an artist and you're getting older and life is kind of passing you by. They get on this train and people enter new stages of life as they're on a train, and they meet up with each other. Eventually this fox character, he just kind of goes to sleep, and while everyone else is doing different things, seems like he's just he's like witnessing his kid grow up around him, or another character was. People are growing up and he's just on this train, kind of like moving through life, and while meaningful stuff is happening around you, but you're just being directed on this kind of lonely, purposeless voyage. The years go forward. You don't really feel connected to real growth or real meaningful personal change or personal narrative. I felt like that was one which kind of, I just walked into this metaphor and I was like, okay, yeah, I see. But I don't know. I felt like, I don't know. It's just me being myself. And, we talked about how, you mentioned how who you are, what age you are makes you feel a certain something. I feel like, oh yeah, this reminds me maybe how I felt when I was younger too. Right. Well, he'll grow up. That's so condescending to say. I just felt like that's something I felt, Yeah.
I think now hearing you talk about it, it makes more sense to me. I think the first time it made a little bit less sense, and the first couple of pages both times are kind of annoying because there's all this business about this guy who listens to music underwater, and then he directs him to get on the train, and I thought, well, let's cut those 2 pages out and start on the train. It was very random.
Well, the metaphor, I just kind of spoke out right now.
Okay.
The metaphor which I just spit out is more, I felt more clear in the second half of the story, and I agree. The first half, it doesn't exactly fit that it isn't tied in that same bow. It is kind of a bit harder to grasp in the beginning.
Mm-hmm. And the only other one I think we haven't even touched, which is not like a one-pager, is the one almost at the end. It's on page 264. Again, I'll have to look up who the artist is at the front.
Oh yeah, that was a weird one, huh? That was
Chase by Antoine Cosset or Cos. Don't even know really what to make of it. It's this giant statue with holes in it, and people are in there, and they have sex, and then they get on a motorbike. Some bees go in the hole. I don't know. They get on a motorbike and then go so fast they turn into a blob, and then they splat against the side of a truck. And,
I mean, to me, I read it as another story of, kind of like, it's like purposeless velocity. It's just things happen, they have a violent end, and there's no meaning to be interpreted out of that, except for you just, kind of looking at the world and the symbols that he puts in here and kind of figure out, what does that mean? But it isn't granted to us and with a clear message.
Right. So is that one of the ones you would say is like that you didn't get anything out of it because it was kind of neat?
Well, I'd say the symbols in the beginning, which are kind of strong, and by the way, the drawings are pretty nice and cool.
Yeah.
So that's a draw. Them living inside of this giant statue seems kind of interesting. But yeah, I mean, in the end, it's just a countdown to this big explosion and nothing. And so I don't know. I kind of shrug and turn the page.
Right.
Because I don't feel like I was engaged.
Right.
Personally.
Do you? Okay. So final thoughts. Jerry Springer's final thoughts. Do we think that Kramers has developed, or at least this volume has anthology-itis?
Oh man, I'm not gonna say that. I don't know. I mean, for me, it's just I don't know what they're. I was kind of thinking, it made me wonder if I were to say that, Kumar. I feel like that would be just me like putting my meaning on this book.
Yeah.
And what I don't know. I mean, I kind of come at this kind of lost and to it. I was reading a couple of other anthologies recently, and I was reading this. I was reading some old science fiction anthologies, like like they used to do. And I guess if you go to a used bookstore, you see these like little anthologies of science fiction books, and I would read these little collections of artist stories, and they would tell a little bit about the author and who they are and what they've done. And I felt like, I wish I read that in Kramers. Right. Just a little bit of information about what is the editor's purpose here.
Right.
I'm a little bit mystified as to the editor's purpose, and if it was just a little more, if that was a little more clear, then I could take stories without their own stated purpose, and I could maybe see through the editor's eye a little bit. But for me, I just felt like not getting context was kind of rough.
Okay.
That's kind of what I wanted, is a little more context. But I mean, like we were saying, I mean, I appreciate that Kramers experiments. We're talking about the not having any bylines on any of the things. It feels real deliberate. But I don't know. It didn't really. I don't know. I felt like kind of, what am I doing inside of this book? But that's just me. What do you think? Do you anthology-itis? I see what you mean.
I think it's still epic. Like, there's some amazing stuff in here, and there's some stuff that's not as amazing this time around, which is maybe... Well, even 8 had stuff that I wasn't, that I didn't take to personally.
I mean, that's good. There should be highs and lows for everyone.
Yeah, I think it's still way up there. Like, even Raw and Weirdo had stuff that didn't work. You know what I mean? And you would never take those out of the pantheon of the greatest anthologies or greatest comics. But yeah, there's something. It didn't hit me super hard like 8 did.
I mean,
and I think that's
Kramers is what it is. It definitely reprints all these things in beautiful color. As nice as can possibly be done. It's a big old book. And so the size is great, and there's so many artists. So, I mean, it totally succeeds, and, like, it introduced me to a bunch of artists.
Sure.
I mean, that's really cool. It looks beautiful, has all these new, familiar and new artists. It definitely has different styles and approaches. So it succeeds on all those levels. So success. It does all these great things an anthology should do.
Yeah.
So I don't know what I'm complaining about.
Yeah, me neither.
But I am complaining about it.
Yeah.
I did feel kind of lost and disattached within the book. But not by all. But that's a feeling I had. So I don't know. There's that. That's just it's just my taste too. I mean, I'm just here talking about my taste and what stories ought to be.
Right. Right.
So that's totally personal. So I'm sure anyone who listened to this conversation truly and genuinely appreciate their differences from me in that way. But I'm glad that I get to talk about that to you, Kumar, and hear also that you felt differently. I'm really glad.
Yeah, for sure.
Boom.
I don't think Mome is coming out anymore, and there's no Drawn and Quarterly anthology. I mean, this is it. This is the one to get. Still, it's still awesome. Even if number 9, we have some strange reservations that you and I both can't really articulate exactly. It's still huge.
Yeah. Maybe it's too huge. I think that's a thing too. I think if the book were smaller, there could be a little more. I don't know. I'm just blah 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 spitballing here.
Okay.
It's so big. There's a lot there.
Yeah. All right.
Those Drawn and Quarterly anthologies are usually a bit smaller, and so they're more like impactful.
Yes.
Blah blah blah. Hey, it's a great book. It's worth having.
Yes. Yeah.
Kramers Ergot 9 is published by Fantagraphics. You can write us at mail@deconstructingcomics.com or look us up on Patreon, Twitter, Tumblr, Facebook, and YouTube. All our social media links can be found on the right sidebar at deconstructingcomics.com. Also, please give us a review on iTunes or Stitcher. Our theme is from bensound.com. Last Thursday on To the Bat Polls, we discussed Lorenzo Semple's masterclass in writing a script that's funny for its situations rather than for zingers, and Burgess Meredith's sublime penginess in The Penguin's Nest and The Bird's Last Jest. Also, an update on that Jay Thompson draft script that was rewritten into the Impractical Joker arc, and on our search for more versions of Hefty's Batman theme. Look up To the Bat Polls wherever you find your podcasts or at tothebatpolls.libsyn.com. This Thursday, right here in this podcast feed, a new edition of our spin-off podcast, Critiquing Comics, where Mulele and I critique comics by listeners. If you're looking for some constructive feedback on your comic, send it to us at mail@deconstructingcomics.com. And please try to keep it to about 30 pages. Next week, an interview with New Yorker cartoonist Joe Dater. Till then, this is Tim, and thanks for listening to Deconstructing Comics.